All right, let's move on to blood and blood cells. Before we get started talking about more specific types of blood cells, let's talk about how we make blood in general. And this process is known as hemopoiesis. So this is showing hemopoiesis. It's also known as hematopoiesis. And this is production of blood cells. Now, I just want to let you know, like in development, this hemopoiesis initially occurs in our yolk sac. Now, if you're wondering, like, how do we have a yolk sac? Well, basically what placental animals did is instead of laying an egg, we kept the egg inside of us, all right? And so we still make this embryological tissue, the yolk sac, which in, reptiles and birds, that yolk there is used as an energy source for the developing embryo. With us, we've co-opted it for other things, and I just want to show you a few models here. So this is what it looks like in us. So here is us, there's the yolk sac. It's the embryonic membrane that develops below us. Here's a little further along, here is us, there's the yolk sac. All right, even a little further along than that, here is us, there's that yolk sac. So hemopoiesis initially occurs in that yolk sac, so it's going to make our blood cells. All right, and then what happens next is once our liver and spleen develop, hemopoiesis is going to occur there, all right, as well as yolk sac. And then once our red bone marrow develops, hemopoiesis will occur there and throughout the rest of our lives, and it'll stop being done in the spleen and our liver. It continues in that yolk sac though. And that yolk sac will eventually be incorporated into our umbilical cord. And this is why when kids are born, one of the things they might ask you is what you want to do with that cord blood. Because that cord blood are those cells that can make all the different kinds of cells. All right? So if you have questions about that, you can ask me whenever we come back into class. Now, when we look at regular hemopoiesis, we start off with these cells called hemocytoblasts. So a hemocytoblast are typically called bone marrow cells. All right? And these hemocytoblasts, these are our blood stem cells, and they can make any of the blood cells that we have. They can make red blood cells, they can make platelets, and they can also make the different kinds of white blood cells, and that's what these guys are. All right, so let's move on into looking at red blood cells. So if we go back and take a look at a red blood cell, here is a red blood cell here, all right? These are cells, red blood cells are also known as erythrocytes. And these are cells that carry oxygen in the blood. And they are packed with hemoglobin. Now this is a look at hemoglobin here. Hemoglobin is a protein that carries oxygen in our blood. And it's what gives our blood its color. It's a nice red color. All right? So let's look at some characteristics of red blood cells. One is that they lack a nucleus. That nucleus gets ejected during development. So when we are making a red blood cell, here's our red blood cell at the end, you can see we have a nucleus to begin with, but it gets kicked out. And it gets kicked out to make more room for hemoglobin. All right? Now, because red blood cells lack that nucleus, they can't divide, and they can't even repair themselves. And so once red blood cells move through our body a few times, like 75,000 times, they get damaged by moving through our smallest blood vessels, capillaries, because they can barely fit through them, all right? And so those damaged red blood cells then are removed by our liver and spleen. If we look at our red blood cell counts, all right, male red blood cell counts, we have anywhere from 4.6 to 6.2 million red blood cells per millimeter cubed of blood. That's a lot of blood cells in a small amount of space. Females have anywhere from 4.2 to 5.4 million cells per millimeter cubed of blood. All I really want you to take away from this is guys typically have more than you ladies, all right? And the reason is because guys typically have more muscle mass, and more muscle requires more energy. If you need more energy, you need more oxygen for that energy, okay? So let's look at erythropoiesis. So erythropoiesis is making of a red blood cell. So that's a formation of red blood cells. All right. So we secrete a hormone called erythropoietin. It is also known as EPO. This is a hormone that causes red blood cell formation. all right? And that is secreted by our kidneys. So if our kidneys sense a decrease in oxygen levels, they're going to secrete erythropoietin, which goes to our red bone marrow, and it's going to cause more red blood cell production. And then we're going to have, by having more red blood cells, we have more oxygen in our blood. There are some vitamins that are important in making red blood cells. One is vitamin B, and another is folic acid. Those are necessary for DNA synthesis. Iron is necessary for hemoglobin synthesis. So if we go back to this picture, this is showing the heme group. Right in the middle of that heme group is an iron. Okay? And so if you have a deficiency in any of these, so vitamin B12 or folic acid or iron, this can lead to an anemia, which is a condition of red blood cell or hemoglobin deficiency. Okay? So let's stop there.